Hey friendo, Steve here. Welcome back to Wrestle Juice. Today I'm going to do one of my little ranty rants where I see a thing and then I just feel the need to talk about it here on the channel because it's kind of what we do here at Wrestle Juice. I like to look at your hot takes. I like to look at what's going on Reddit and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. And there's something that I saw on Twitter that a lot of people responded to, and I'm sitting here thinking, am I in the wrong here? Am I the wrong one here? Am I like, I don't know, I see this and I react a certain way, and then I see a lot of the responses and I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe I'm missing something. So anyways, I was on Twitter the other day, and there was a report that had dropped on Fightful about the segment between Seth Rollins and CM Punk that we talked about here on the channel that was on Monday Night Raw, and it was their big promo. And the report on Fightful was simply this. Seth Rollins and CM Punk's promo segment from last night's WWE Raw did not have a producer listed. Now, for anybody who plunks down that $5 a month for Fightful Select, which I personally think is a good investment if you're a wrestling fan, because you get to hear about all sorts of bits and pieces and breaking news and et cetera, et cetera. You also get very often, I think usually weekly, a rundown of who the producers were for various matches and segments on Monday Night Raw and SmackDown. And it's not something that I look at very often. I think it's cool that it's there because as a fan of pro wrestling, sometimes it's fun to know, hey, who was involved in this? It's just part of being a fan of something. You generally want to know more about that thing. And in the world of pro wrestling, that sometimes can be pretty difficult to come across. There's no credits at the end of Monday Night Raw. There's no credits at the end of SmackDown. I watch an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation because I'm a big old nerd, and I can see, oh, okay, interesting. Rob Bowman directed this particular episode. I actually met him once. It's pretty cool. It's the guy who directed the first episode where they ever had Borg in the Star Trek Next Generation. I don't know. You could see, okay, well, that's kind of interesting. This person directed this. Well, what did this person do afterwards? Oh, Rob Bowman directed the X-Files movie. That's pretty cool. That's pretty neat. Good info to have just as a fan of stuff. It's cool to know what goes on behind the scenes. Well, as you and I both know, in wrestling, there's always been that thing where the people in the industry want to keep the people outside the industry at kind of an arm's length. And some of it I understand because sometimes wrestling fans can be a bit much. Let's be honest. They can be a bit much. But for the rest of us who like to think they're not a bit much, I'm just sort of curious about what goes on behind the scenes, you know, or you can go to shoot interviews. Look at that. Chris Van Vliet has interviews, and that's kind of cool. And you can find out about that kind of stuff. But the industry as a whole isn't really open about how it's made, how it's done. There's still that thing where they want you to be a fan, but not too much of a fan that you give a damn about how it's made. Why would anybody want to know this? So there was a response to this tweet, a quote tweet from Brian Gewirtz. Of course, this guy was with WWE, I think, for like over 15 years. He was a head writer, and he was there for a long time. It was from like 99. So the Attitude Era all the way up until whatever that would have been, 2015 or 2016, when he left. And so he's seen it all there, right? As a writer, he's seen it all. He actually literally wrote a book. And now he is part of The Rock's, Dwayne Johnson's production company. I think it's called $7. And he was an executive producer on Young Rock. And if I'm not mistaken, I saw his IMDb listing mention that he wrote an episode. And so he works for The Rock's production company now in a relatively high position. Here's a credit. With his credited name on an episode of Young Rock here on the pilot episode as an executive producer. He has credit right there, right? So he responded to this. He said, this is so stupid. When there's no physicality, there's no producer assigned to segment. Been that way forever. Doesn't mean there's not a writer working with talent. The bigger question, why is anyone within the company sharing scripts and rundowns with anyone outside the company? So the first part of this, or the first point he makes, is when there's no physicality, there's no producer assigned to segment. Been that way to forever. Doesn't mean there's not a writer working with talent. The Fightful Select report didn't say otherwise. It didn't say that there was no writer involved. It didn't say that Punk and Rollins went out there on their own and just winged it. It didn't say that. It's just sort of a bizarrely unnatural sort of, anger to this tweet. This is stupid. Doesn't mean there's not a writer working with talent. It didn't say otherwise. And then he says the bigger question, why is anyone within the company sharing scripts and rundowns with anyone outside the company? Maybe, just maybe, because somebody thinks it'd be interesting. Because there's interest in that. Because fans want to know more about what goes on behind the scenes. I honestly don't see the problem with that. But a ton of people seem to have a problem with this. I got on Reddit and people one person said, why does any fan care one way or the other? Incredible. This guy says, I don't get fans' obsession with wrestling producer. It's just people making inferences based on what they liked and didn't like. Ultimately, if something is good or bad on some level, it just comes down to the performers. Let's see here. There was another one. And so people, it's funny because in this Reddit thread anyways, here we go. Wrestling and a lot of topics needs a whole lot of more. I actually don't know what goes on with these things, and people need to stop pretending they know how this stuff works. People need to stop pretending they know how this stuff works. That's sort of a theme in wrestling when it comes to wrestling fans. Don't act like you know what goes on. We're not going to tell you. Every other form of entertainment is happy and excited to pull the curtain back and show interested fans how it works. Director's commentary, behind the scenes material, EPK packets. Movies and TV shows offer tons of behind the scenes, how it's done. Actors love talking about acting. They love talking about the craft. Most directors love talking about how stuff is done. I saw a fascinating 5-minute video about how Christopher Nolan made practical looking nuclear effects, like nuclear bomb effects for Oppenheimer. It's interesting. There's the weird resentment from those in the wrestling world against the fan base for simply being curious. And that's bizarre to me. It's always been very bizarre to me. Somebody suggested on the Twitter thread that maybe somebody's leaking this out because they feel like these producers might want credit for their work, might want to be recognized for their work they're doing. Brian Gewirtz says, you don't take a job at WWE for quote unquote credit. He uses the quotes here, for credit. Make sure you please the audience, the talent, and your bosses. Don't undermine everyone's work by sending rundowns of the show to outside newsletters day of the show. You want a credit? Get staffed on a Barney Miller reboot or something, or on Young Rock for that matter. I added the last part with Young Rock. You don't take job at WWE for credit. Every other form of entertainment gives credit to the fucking people that work on those shows, albums, and movies. Why does WWE, why is there a difference there? There are entire entertainment unions who have very specific rules as to how credit is provided on screen and how long those names have to be on there. When Brian Gewirtz's name shows up as a credit listed as executive producer on Young Rock, it's mandatory that it's there for a specified amount of time. I'm sure he would love it if somebody said, you don't take a job in TV to get credit. You please your audience and your talent and the bosses. That's all you're there to do. I honestly don't get that. That is such a bizarre gatekeeping philosophy from somebody who has moved on from the WWE and has had a successful career in entertainment, who gets credit on screen for what he does. WWE and AEW, they don't feature scrolls of their talent, of their behind the scenes workers. But why not? Shouldn't they? Wouldn't it be nice to get the same credit for your entertainment product that other industries do? Why do you feel like it's totally fine and normal and acceptable to shortchange the people putting in the work behind the scenes? That to me is bizarre. Somebody said, then why would somebody take a job with WWE? A 52-week-a-year job with a real nice salary for a business I grew up on, love, with 15,000 people popping on a weekly basis to something I thought of did it for me. I also got free cookies at Times Square. I don't know. It's bizarre to me, this philosophy that like, oh, fans should like pro wrestling, but they shouldn't like it so much that they want to know and are curious about what goes on behind the scenes. They've gaslighted so many fans into thinking, oh, yeah, you shouldn't know more. That's stupid. Now you're just being a mark. You think you know more than everybody else? That's dumb. So the reason why people are interested in shit like this is because they're fans of the product. And when you're fans of something, you generally want to know more. I can't stand this philosophy of, well, either you like it or you don't. I like to know how stuff is made. If I'm watching a movie and I'm like, holy shit, this is really good. What else did that person do? And then I'll look up their name and I'll go find other stuff that they've done. It's a normal thing in the world outside of professional wrestling. That was just a rant. I don't know. People are weird. It's just that's the most bizarre thing. I kind of understood it back when there was the whole like, oh, we got to keep kayfabe. We got to make people. There's still some people out there that think this shit is like a real actual fight that's happening between people in between the ropes. We want to protect the business. Nobody has thought that it's real in God knows how long. Like they literally did a Super Bowl commercial where they showed a bunch of stuntmen doing shit, interacting with the wrestlers, and Vince McMahon let a big old get it. But then like they don't have the credit for the people behind the scenes listed. And to me, that's just, it's fucking weird and it's bizarre. And I don't know why a guy like Brian Gewirtz wouldn't understand that. I guess because he's been there and he's been at the top. So fuck everybody else below me. You don't get credit. I get credit being in TV and movies, but why should you get credit being in the entertainment industry, just in a different thing? I don't know. That's weird. Am I the one wrong here? Am I the wrong one here? Let me know in the comments below. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something. It's always possible. See you around.